Cool. So welcome everybody. We'll get started now. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate you guys all being here. I'm Mike Martin with the APWA Colorado chapter. I'm president-elect. So 2021, I will be president of APWA. So thanks for joining today. We've got two wonderful speakers with us to educate us on how to be effective virtual communicators. I'll be honest and tell you, I've spent 3 days this week on full day Zoom meetings. So I have seen probably a lot of these errors. So I'm interested to see what you guys come up with and what you come up with on how to improve, because we all need to get a little better at this. So before we get started, a couple acknowledgements, just letting you know. So this conference, this session is being offered in place of when we typically get together for our annual chapter conference in October. Obviously, given the current circumstances, we couldn't have that conference this year. So we're trying to fill some content in by having these kind of sessions to get some education out to our APWA members. Please note that the last session, we did a session on 5G. Dave Zelenock and the folks over at HR Green did a session on 5G small cells, and that's been posted to the APWA Colorado chapter website. So if you're interested in seeing that or you missed it, please go back and check it out, take a look and listen into that. I'd also want to acknowledge distinguished guests here. We've got Laura Krager with the Mile High Flood District. Laura is the National APWA Technical Director and Leadership for Leadership and Management. So thanks, Laura, for being here. You're kind of recognizing our national presence for APWA. So appreciate you for chiming in. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. So just a note to everybody, the session is being recorded. So just note that that is going on, and we will post this later after the session is complete to the website as well. Initially, everybody will be muted. So just a reminder, if you come off mute, if you accidentally hit it, please put yourself back on mute. It'll help to not disturb the speakers as they're going along. If you have any questions during the performance, we're going to do those through a chat. If you see it down at the bottom center of your screen, there's a button for chat. So please enter your questions into the chat function there, type them in, and then we are going to hold all questions to the end. So we'll get through the presentation, and then we'll kind of go through the chat questions, and we'll lob them into speakers and see where it goes. And also, as John said, there are no CEU credits for this. You might lose credits for this if you submit it, so don't do that. Just a housekeeping item there as well. So with that, I'll introduce our speakers. We've got John Burke. John Burke is the Development and Construction Manager for the City of Westminster's new downtown Westminster project. Over the past 5 years, John has helped the City of Westminster negotiate over $300 million in private investment to build over 1 million square feet of mixed-use, commercial, residential, entertainment, and hotel development in the city's new downtown Westminster project. In addition to his full-time job with the city, John has been a trainer for APWA Public Works Institute and has given a number of speeches at APW Day, ACEC, SMPS conferences, and is also the author of a book titled RFP, Request for Personality, Win People, Win Projects. If you don't have that book, check it out. It is a really good one. We also have with us today, welcome Dave Skoudas. Dave works for as a watershed manager at the Mile High Flood District in Denver. Dave participates in master planning, design, construction, maintenance, and development review for waterways in the northern area of Metro Denver. Dave has worked at the district since 2010. Prior to that, he was an engineering consultant for 9 years in Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado. He is also the author of a recently published book, The Effective Client: Why Being a Good Client is Smart Business in the Architecture, Engineering, and Construction Industries. So check that out as well. So with that, Dave and John, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Mike and Pam, for having us, and welcome everybody. Happy Friday. I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right. I think I should be good now. Sorry, just making sure I don't screw up the technology right as we start. Okay. This whole work from home and virtual work experience, it was kind of novel at first, right? You know, no commuting, my kitchen is the break room, can wear sweatpants all day. But sometimes it feels like we're all kind of plunging into a really messed up episode of the Brady Bunch. You know, who knew that graphic was going to be so timeless? And yes, I know I've situated John and I as the daughters. I felt compelled to put us in the squares that the parents were looking at so adoringly. John, I guess that makes you Marcia, and I would be Jan. And I guess I just made it weird, didn't I, already? But the the novelty of this whole experience wore off pretty quickly. Here is a picture of me pre-pandemic. And, so young and full of possibilities, had the whole world in front of me. And then here I am at the end of just March. And boy, that didn't take long. We just happened to buy and sell a house and move at the end of March. So I think that played a little bit into my disposition in that picture on the right. But John, how has this been going for you? John, I can't hear you. We're teaching a virtual communication webinar and I can't hear you. This isn't good. John, your camera's off.
Sorry, Dave. No, there I am. Okay. You got me now?
Sorry about that.
I just, no, what I was trying to say, Dave, is yeah, it's been pretty seamless for the most part. Haven't had too many issues.
Totally seamless, John. I'm sorry.
What's
sorry.
that?
We got a little video problem.
Oh, shoot. Hang on. No, what I was saying, Dave, was that, this technology stuff is pretty simple. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure out, dude, how to get your mic, figured out, your camera. It's pretty simple. So I've really had no major issues. In fact, I will say this is one benefit, and apologize for that. I think it was pretty straightforward. The one benefit I have seen from working from home is that for the first time, probably my entire career, I actually make it home on time, like every night. It's actually been pretty nice from that benefit.
Yeah, that's right, John. We are working from home, or are we now living at work? Just gonna let that question sink in for everybody as I reshare my screen here. But very quickly, we've all had to get used to a new way of doing business, a new way of interacting with each other, and based on how used to this we're all becoming, I don't see the virtual meetings and presentations just disappearing once this pandemic is a thing of the past. The old days of audio-only conference calls are likely gone forever. It's so valuable to see a shared screen and sometimes to see each other. I've been encouraging our office, in fact, to invest in some decent cameras and microphones for our conference rooms so that as we transition back to meeting and conference rooms, we can then have a mixture of folks in person and virtual and still be able to reasonably see and hear each other. And really, it's going to save me time and mileage from having to drive around, because pre-pandemic, I had plenty of meetings where I spent as much time driving to and from them as I did in them. So I don't think this virtual meeting technology is going to go away. But even 8 months into this, we're all still finding new ways to screw up virtual communication, and I am as guilty as anybody. And John and I will be sharing some of our own virtual meeting failures here with you today.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, Dave. So today, again, as Dave gets ready to share his screen back up, we're going to share some failures to avoid, some things that we have witnessed, not only personally, but been guilty of as well. Then we're also going to pivot into some tips for giving effective meetings, not only how you sound, visuals, things of that nature. And then we'll dive even deeper into some techniques on what it really takes to give solid virtual presentations from both the public and the private sectors. So again, we're going to keep this pretty light today. Again, like Mike said, this isn't intended to be like, super cranial. It's going to be a lot of us just kind of having some fun. Hopefully you guys can relate to that and learn some things as we go along the way. So let's dive in, Dave. Let's hit the first one, which is failure number one.
Yeah, and I don't know what the opposite of cranial is, but that's going to be today. Yeah, number one, failing to mute yourself. This is a big one we can all relate to, and I will tell you, I have a very barely healthy paranoia of failing to mute myself. It's just something I worry about anytime I need to mute myself, and maybe for some reason there's something else going on that I don't need everybody else to hear about. But I always think of that. You remember that movie Naked Gun with Leslie Nielsen? He has this moment in that movie where he's speaking at a press conference, and then when he's done talking, he runs off to the bathroom, but he's got a lavalier microphone and he has the hot mic going on, and then everybody gets to hear him go to the bathroom. And so I have a healthy paranoia of that. I would have shown you guys the clip, but it gets a little PG-13.
Yeah, we couldn't do it. Thanks, Dave. 'Cause that little part, to everybody listening, we literally had that, and we're going to show that. And it was just a little bit too, so we did. So again, thanks for doing that, Dave.
John, you had to be the nice angel on my shoulder and be like, "Don't do it, Dave. Don't." Just don't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I have some friends that had some stories. Like I have a buddy who he works for a foundation for a university, and so he's always hitting up old alumni for donations and things like that. And he was talking to this older retired engineer one time, and the guy thought he was muted, and there was a bunch of noise going on in the background. And he thought he muted himself, but he didn't. But all of a sudden, he started screaming at his wife in the background. He's like, "Donna, shut off the freaking vacuum cleaner!" Just so, yeah, the mute thing, that's a fail. Make sure if you got something goofy going on, you got to hit that mute button. But John, you had a similar experience.
No, this just happened yesterday, Dave. Literally, Seth Glass in my office was facilitating an FOR meeting with CDOT. And there's like 25 people on the call, and it was a really solid, great meeting, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, literally about, 45 minutes into it, one of the guys that, should have been muted, but apparently he was calling in, he was like rotary dial. I don't know what he was doing, but he literally had the mic hot, and all of a sudden somebody came up behind him and was like, "Dave, dude, I didn't know you were in the office today. Oh, that's awesome. Great to see you." And you could tell he was like so embarrassed. He was, "Shh, wait, hey, shh, I'm on a conference call." And poor Seth is like trying to figure out which one of these guys is the one doing that so I can quickly mute him.
Yeah, and I don't know if y'all haven't picked up on it. On most of the technologies you work on, if there's background noise on somebody's sound feed, you'll see their window light up, and that's a cue that you can at least tell them, "Hey, maybe mute yourself, John," or whoever. Yeah. So that's failure number one to avoid, is the failure to mute yourself. Yeah. So we're going to transition into failure number two, which is the side chat that isn't actually on the side and maybe not private as you think it is. John, you got an experience with this one.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, even today, I think we'll be collecting some of the chats as questions for later, if there are any. But yeah, sometimes that whole side chat thing can be rather embarrassing. I know here recently, actually this summer, I was on a video call with some of our executive leadership team, and I happened to be golfing with one of our directors the next day. And so we're on here, and he literally, he is an expert in this stuff. I'm not. And so, he jumps in a little side thing chat and, private messages me basically and says, "Hey, John, looking forward to tomorrow to play some golf." And I reply back, I'm kind of like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." So I chat back and I'm like, "Oh, dude, yeah, the weather's going to be awesome too." And, send. And then when I hit send, I looked and I was like, "Oh, geez, that just went to everybody, on the entire group." There's like, 30 people on this call. And I'm like, "Oh, geez." Well, thankfully the scroll, that chat kind of keeps on going. So I'm like, I think we're good. Unthankfully though, the moderator, the guy who was actually leading it, couldn't let that go. He says, "Hey, Burke, yeah, thanks for letting us know about the weather, dude." Yeah, solid.
Yeah.
Like,
very happy that your golf game tomorrow is getting figured out during our meeting.
Right.
Yeah. And I will be honest, I have been guilty of cracking jokes sometimes on the side chat, but I think what can start happening is it almost starts becoming the group of middle schoolers that are sitting in the back of the classroom just kind of cracking jokes with each other, because I think we all still have that 13-year-old in us. I know I do. And sometimes he comes out, and yeah, gotta restrain that stuff. I will say I also was a part of a bigger group like you're talking about, John, one time when there was a productive side chat going on, but then eventually the side chat started turning into jokes too. And then eventually the side chat was getting more energetic than it was pretty clear people weren't listening to the speaker. Right. And it was to the point where I, of all people, had to put in the chat like, "Hey, maybe we should pay attention to the so-and-so who's talking right now." So the side chat, use it wisely, don't abuse it. And it is something that if you think something's private, it probably isn't if you're doing it during a meeting, because I have heard that everybody will see the entirety of the side chat if they want to at the end of the meeting. So something to keep in mind, avoid that failure. Number two.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Dave. And for everybody listening today, I'm sure you're all aware of this, but yeah, all those chat boxes, they literally get saved to your computer. And if you haven't found those, you might want to go look, and you can actually pull those up and see everything that was chatted in those, because particularly for a public entity, I'm pretty sure those can be discoverable through a core request. And so anything that is electronic and in that platform, be very, very cautious about what you say in that space. So,
well, especially if it's like an inside joke about a project maybe that you would never say to anybody outside of your organization. I hadn't thought about that, John, but that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, just word of caution, be advised, and again, they can be pretty funny, but, I will say this, Dave. So as far as things that I've really found to be just absolutely gut-wrenching hysterical, happens to be our next failure number 3 to avoid, which is background surprises. And thanks for finding this clip, Dave. I don't know if you guys, if you've done any, kind of YouTube searches for bad background images, but this one in particular is hysterical. You can see this BBC News interviewer reporter working from home, and that's his daughter. I think that's kind of jumping into the background. And if you keep watching it, you'll actually see like his wife or nanny or somebody come grab the kid, drag him out, close the door, and it's just absolutely hysterical.
Yeah, and he was like talking about international trade or something very, very serious. And this was pre-pandemic. So this guy was like the trailblazer of Zoom background failures. It was fantastic. In all the wrong ways, but I mean, he got famous for all the wrong reasons.
Exactly. So this reminds me, though, I did have one of my colleagues, her husband actually is an infectious disease doc at Children's Hospital there in Aurora. And as many of you know who have anybody in that medical profession, that there's a certain protocol with COVID where, because of the extreme, kind of transmissivity of that, they are required to, particularly him, he has to come into the house, go right into the laundry room, literally strip down and throw everything in the laundry room. And then he has to bolt upstairs to go shower up to make sure, kind of stay clean, sanitized, all that. Well, my colleague was literally sitting there with her laptop on the couch, and she didn't realize that he was coming home at that particular time, and ended up having, like, the camera was right in that really, like, the absolute worst angle possible, right? Where he literally comes out, bolts out of the laundry room and runs up the stairs, right? And she was on this call with, again, our city manager and a few others. They're like, oh my God. There are certain things you just can't unsee at this point in time.
That would be a surprise to, that's, yeah. My wife works in healthcare, and she had a similar routine, and I am thankful that's why that door behind me right there stays very shut, because you can't undo that, can't unwind that one. But I will say that I did have, people don't know this about me, but I actually have an identical twin brother, and he was visiting one time, and we had an awkward thing happen like this. And well, here, I actually have the video. Let me show you.
I know we're trying to get this done by a certain time frame. Oh, sorry. Seriously? Sorry. Can you put some clothes on?
Okay, that was really me in both of those, and I was fully clothed. Okay, that was just for kicks. All right. Just in case people don't know, I don't really have a twin brother. All right, I just got to put all that. I got to disclaim every single bit of that. But yeah, background surprises, be in a locked door, whatever you got to do. I actually like this particular fellow who got a little creative when he had maybe an important meeting, and he needed to head his kids off at the pass. And if you can't read all that, it says, do not enter or lose screen time for 2 days. Dad is in a meeting. Answers to your questions are either no, it's in the wash, unless you are bleeding, it's fine, pieces of fruit, or ask mom.
Exactly. That's exactly it, Dave.
Yes. All right. So yeah, now we're on to number 4. Number 4, and this one's a tough one for me to avoid. Yeah.
So Dave, yeah, I love this one. So number 4, failure to avoid, right? Which is distracting background images. So, everybody knows the Tiger King, Joe Exotic, we're hanging out. I'm actually, to be honest with you, Dave, seeing that image really, really makes me long for new Hollywood movies, right? I mean, this has been, the pandemic has been tough for a lot of spaces, especially theaters. But man, I long for good quality plots, right? Good storylines, good action, adventure, cliffhangers, right? The whole 9 yards.
Yeah,
Like
I have no
nowadays-
idea what you're talking about. Yeah, it's I have no idea. Yeah,
Everybody's a superstar these days, right, Dave? I mean,
that's right. That's right. And you know, some of my coworkers can attest. If I'm sporting this particular background, I will look for any and every opportunity to answer a question with a Top Gun quote, such as this one.
Negative Ghost Rider. That pattern is full.
So the point is, don't overdo it, people, as tempting as it may be.
exactly.
Yes.
No, it's so
Well,
true, Dave. It's so
yes.
true. So,
So we are on to, what are we on to, John? Are we on to the number 5 now? On to number 5.
sorry, what was that? Oh, geez.
John.
Yeah, sorry. That was failure number 5, which is getting caught multitasking. So this is one,
Yeah.
is literally, I don't know if this has ever happened to you guys, but I've been in meetings where all of a sudden I'll literally get a phone call and be like, hey, can you guys just hang on a second? Yeah, yes. Okay, what? All right.
No idea what you're talking about. That's never
almost
happened to me.
over. I'll pick some of that. Okay. All right. Bye.
Oh, never happened to me. Can you guys see my email?
Oh, Dave, what are you doing? I thought we were having a conversation. I
Crap.
took a quick call. Oh, that's all right.
Sorry. I will say I have been guilty of this. I actually forgot I was sharing my screen, and then the conversation went away from me for a minute, and I started answering an email, and then people are talking, and then one of my coworkers is like, Dave, yeah, we can see that. I was like, oh man, I'm sorry. It was a real quick one, and I'm sorry. I held my head in shame, and then I had to crack a bunch of jokes at myself.
No, it's true. And I'm sure everybody on this call has had the same thing. Like, you're sitting in these meetings and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't, you're busy. You're trying to get some other stuff done. Then you get, caught doing this, like, dang it. So yep, totally get it. So that is failure number 6 or number 5. So let's dive into failure number 6, Dave.
Okay, failure number 6.
So I've been on a few phone calls or these video calls, Dave, where quite candidly, I probably should have left my camera off, right?
Yeah.
It's like I got my ball cap on, my 1970s hairdo back in the early pandemic when, I literally, you don't know this about me, Dave, but when my hair grows out, it literally goes kind of afro-ish, man. It's massive. Yeah. And so, back, I'm like, oh, dude, it was really bad. In fact, my wife over the summer, I think Mike Mark, we were talking about this, how our spouses ended up buying some like clippers and things. And so my hair got so bad early in the pandemic where my wife literally bought some, threw me in the backyard like the dog and just shaved my head. It's like, you got to get this stuff. You are not presentable in public is really what that meant. So the point being, dude, if you can make it a phone call, make it a phone call. Like we don't need to have everything as a web call, right?
Yeah, there's nothing saying everything has to be a virtual call. Like when we first started, John, when you and I first started planning this presentation out, you scheduled the meeting. And then when the time for the meeting came, I was looking for a meeting invite on my calendar. And then my phone rang and you were calling me and I was like, whoa, what is this? A phone call? Like, whoa. And then I was like, that's actually kind of nice. It was like, we had nothing we needed to look at. We didn't need to look at each other. I was like, it was perfectly fine. You kind of forget that. And I will say I was guilty of this one time really good. And I will share this screenshot that Shay Thomas down here in the corner, who's kind of looking all disapprovingly. I had this meeting with, basically those are 4 people who are kind of my bosses. And it turned out at the meeting, I needed to be driving to my next meeting, which was like a construction site visit. And so for whatever reason, I left the video on and I set the phone on my cup holder. And so I kind of made my 4 bosses look like Honey, I Shrunk My Bosses, or like ants sitting on my cup holder, like staring up at me the whole time. So they were just like laughing at how ridiculous I looked. And like every time I get to a stoplight, I'd kind of look down at them for 30 seconds and then I just keep driving. It was like, why did I do that? It doesn't need to be video. Okay.
Exactly. No, it's so true, Dave. Yes, that is that failure. And sadly, I took a parent teacher conference that way. I was driving on the road and, I should say I wasn't driving. So disclosure, my daughter was driving and it was her parent teacher conference. So she was driving. I had my cell phone kind of driving along. So yeah, it's one of those, I'm like, yeah, just make the call. Just don't get awkward about people watching you, that kind of stuff for sure. So
It's okay. It's okay. It can be a phone call.
that's
Okay.
right. All right, let's dive in. Failure number 7 to avoid, which is assuming that people actually have heard you.
Yes. Yeah, here's a bad example of that.
We got a good example. There you go. Dave, I just got word from our emergency operations manager that under no circumstances should anyone enter the 2 weeks. We've had an outbreak, and if it's going to be extremely likely that you're going to have to, and if you come back positive, you're going to have to, every employee, dude, I don't know. That's as clear as I can be in these circumstances. I got to go.
John, I didn't get any of that. What was the middle thing? John, have you actually been guilty of that one?
Oh, totally. Yeah, there's been times where there's background noises or the internet's kind of glitching out, and all of a sudden you're not picking up on what somebody else is saying, and then there's this awkwardness. If there's like 7 or 8 or 10 people on the call, you're like, do I actually ask him to repeat what he said like 4 minutes ago? I'm like, never mind. We'll just call it.
Well, then you have the awkwardness of like, was it my internet that was making me not hear him, or was it his? And I, being the extroverted type, I'm just going to be like, I couldn't hear you, John.
Exactly.
Just interrupt. So that would be failure number 7. Okay, on to number 8, and this one is rife with material.
Yep. So bad camera angles. You can see you got the
camera.
example here, Dave. Yep.
Yes, bad camera angles. So there's camera angles. It's I guess, we don't all need to be acting like we're on a fashion shoot, but at the same time, we also, don't want to, I don't know, look bad, if you will. And I don't know, we got a few examples here of maybe what not to do. John, maybe you want to go through these? I'll click through them.
Yeah, let's click through, man. So the first one is what we like to call the gopher. I mean, how many guys have been on a call where you're like, dude, can you just get your camera? Like, I don't know what's going on below the nose, the nasal cavities there, but either you have like you're eating, which I've seen people do that don't want to be on camera. They do have some kind of just get up, right? Next one is kind of the other end of the spectrum, which is I call the giraffe, right? It's like, okay, I really don't need to see that elongated neck and then up the nasal cavity, the deviated septum. Like seriously, dude, just watch your camera angle. Or the next one here, I like to call the gaff, which is just like, okay, again, pay attention to how you look on camera. Or the next one, this is me, and I'm sure this is. Hopefully not many of you have seen this pose live, and I'm like, what? So again, your nonverbals, man, are huge, particularly in this time. Or the next one.
That's one where maybe you forgot your camera was on and you're like, oh crap.
Yeah, exactly. No, because we'll leave that into the next one, because I think this next image was, right after this one was like, are you freaking joking? It's like, God, what the, So again, these nonverbals are pretty powerful. And then, here it is, hour number, 7 into a meeting. I'm losing it. And finally, I'm out.
Yeah. If we see the bottom of your shoes, that's probably not a good look.
Exactly. Hey, I'm just glad I had jeans on instead of, sweatpants with a, elastic all bent out of shape. So
yeah, you were all fancy that day. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And John, as bad as all that was, I have a personal laptop. I'm using my work laptop right now, but on my personal laptop, for some odd reason, the manufacturer decided to put the camera at the base of my screen. And so in this case, you can see on my personal laptop when we video conference using that, if I'm typing, that is literally what it looks like. So I look like the giant caterpillar from Mars character. But so in all seriousness, this is where, think about your setup, and, it's not a glamour show, but it's also like, can you adjust something subtly to just sort of represent yourself better on camera? So one thing, and I don't always do this, but if I'm presenting to a larger group, I'll actually stick my laptop up on a platform, and the point there is to get the camera eye level with me. So I have the camera right at eye level, and that was the reason for that. Like on a daily basis, I don't put it there, but if I'm giving a presentation, something more important, I'll move it up like that. Also, John, you're a believer in this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just that whole the camera piece, right? So that was kind of what I had earlier. So I think I have this exact model because it was fine with the laptop cameras. You know, a lot of them are pretty good, but sometimes the quality can be really pixelated. And again, if you're just a kind of typical work day-to-day grind, no big deal. But if you really have a presentation that you have to do that does matter from a quality perspective, then yeah, drop the investment, buy yourself a separated camera that these ones can be mounted onto a tripod. You can send it up, and we'll kind of look at some of those setups a little bit later in the presentation as well. But it does, it makes a difference, quality of the sound as well as the video.
Yeah, not something to take for granted, depending on how often if you're going to be talking to councils or things like that. Sometimes the resolution on your imagery, it can make a difference because you want to be seen. You want to be seen well and clearly. So I find that my laptop camera is pretty cheap, and it works, like John said, for meetings and stuff. But if I get into many more virtual presentations like this, I might invest in one of those cameras. We'll see. But this model right there, I think it was like was one of the top consumer rated ones. So this is a good one if you're looking for a recommendation.
Yeah, and I would just say, yeah, be careful. I actually, the first one I bought was really cheap, and it had like a manual zoom or I guess
telescoping thing.
Yes. Oh my God, that was so cheap, like this plastic thing, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I dropped like $5, let alone 45 on this thing. So yeah, this is one of those areas where invest in the higher priced one, the at least 4.5 stars, because it really does make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. So on to number 9, which is the traveler. This is, that person who has their camera on and they insist on moving around a lot or walking and moving. And for everybody watching, it gets a little much. So here's kind of a what not to do. And I'd encourage you guys to keep an eye on John's facial expressions on this one because they're pretty priceless. Yeah, so John, as I was saying on that little Dry Creek project, I got a design report, but we didn't get that floodplain development permit, and I'm sorry if this is giving you guys some problems with the no rise we got, but sorry, I'm just gonna make myself a little more comfortable here. That's better. That's better.
Time out, bro. What are you doing? Seriously,
I'm meeting. We're having a meeting. What's the problem? Yeah, so that's one where if you need to move locations with your camera, hey, that's okay, but just shut the camera off because you might make somebody get motion sickness from that stuff. So yeah, that's partially why I made you look at John and not me, because I didn't want anybody getting nauseous on our account.
No, and it's so important, Dave. Like in this one too, it's like, put yourself in the context. If you were really having a meeting with somebody, would you say, hey, why don't we finish up this meeting in my bedroom? Right, dude, you don't do that. You don't do it in real life. Don't do it virtually. Stay out of your bedroom. Stay off the bed. Stay off the couch. Don't walk Anyway, you guys get it. Don't do it.
Yeah, keep it professional, people, best we can. I know there is a bed behind me, though, as you say that. So don't you bedroom shame me, John. This is what we got for an office here.
That's all good.
That's all I got. Okay, so our final failure. This has happened to me a few times, and it always is just kind of socially awkward. And it's where you set up a meeting, you invite a bunch of people, and they show up, and for some reason, one of them doesn't seem to actually be in the room. You call them and say, hey, who's caller number 5? And crickets. No one answers. It's like a ghost. And they look like they're there, but they're not really there.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And so that's, again, one of those to avoid that failure. We actually just had this on one of our executive team meetings where we had this, there's a heightened awareness right now with cybersecurity, people hacking into your systems. And this is one of those platforms where between, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, all these different platforms have different security criteria, but sometimes, people are getting into these meetings. And, I was just in one here, like I said, where somebody was calling in and they would never identify themselves. So we kept having to kick them out. So, again, just kind of word of the wise, there are times like this where having a password protected platform is absolutely vital, because there are these situations where we don't actually have, you're like, who is that caller? What's going on? And so again, that's just kind of the failure here is just, making sure if you're present in a meeting and be present. There have been times where I've sat in city council meetings where I'm not certain exactly what I'm going to be called on. And for any of the other, public entities out there who sit through these marathons called public meetings, we've sat through some that go from 6 p.m. till 1 o'clock in the morning. And, now that I'm home, which is nice, so I don't have to be actually at City Hall in the council chambers, but there's still things like bio breaks that are pretty important. And so I remember one night I was sitting there, had my third cup of coffee, and I was, on the dock. It could have been any time. And I'm like, okay, can I bolt down the hallway to use the restroom and come back in time without getting called on? So you just never know. So this is one of those things, just be aware of. You might have that random caller who isn't the attendee, who isn't actually attending. So
yeah.
Well, that wraps up, Dave. I think our top 10 failures. I know there are dozens more that we could have covered, but that was at least from our perspective. So the things that we've seen. If you want to wrap us up there.
Yeah. So now let's actually jump into more substantive things. I'm sorry, we just had to make light of some of this stuff because the comedy, it just pervades everything. It just abounds in this experience we've all had. But we want to get into some of the more substantive parts now and talk about some of the techniques, tips and tricks that John and I have seen work successfully, both in virtual meetings, and then we'll get into virtual presentations as well. And John, you had some situations that you'd like to share on how to have effective meetings with people.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. So even in this virtual environment, people are still people. So as you go to the next, couple slides, what we'll talk about is the importance of, effective communication. And in that, there's this study done in 1971 that identifies the ways we communicate between words, tone, and body language. And you see from this graphic, 7% of your communication truly comes through the words that you use. 38% comes through the tone, how you say it. And over 55% are in these nonverbals, more body language. And so think about yourself, and I'll tell you, in this virtual environment, what I found is when I was first getting on there, all of a sudden you see 4 or 5 people, little squares on your screen. I would say by raise of hands, but looking at the audience, I'm guessing you're probably similar to me, that as I'm looking at that screen, I would say over half the time, I'm actually looking at my own face versus who's speaking, right? And I'm looking, I'm like, oh my God, I'm truly, Dave, I don't know, 3-4 weeks into this whole virtual environment, as I'm looking at my face, I'm like, dude, you look like you're pissed, like you just ate a sour grape or something. You're all just all squint, you're looking like this. Yeah, exactly. You're right in the camera, forehead. I mean, all these kind of things. And I'm like, God, I gotta sit up a little bit. I should probably try to have at least a fake smile when I'm listening to somebody talk, pretend like I'm really engaged and interested in what's happening. And so those nonverbals are huge, right? And so we want to make sure that we're able to communicate effectively utilizing this platform, because it's not going away. And that'll be a theme as we finish out the rest of today, is the virtual meetings are here to stay. So we really ought to get better at having these, using words, tone, and body language, how critical that is. And one of the things, as you go to the next slide, Dave, is I found I can't wing it when it comes to more, I would say, crucial conversations or difficult conversations with employees, particularly in virtual environment. You never know if you're going to get, internet's going to cut out, the sound quality, all those sort of things. But having, again, a virtual meeting is really important. So I want to say, if you're probably, a lot of you are familiar with this, last fall I went to the Center for Creative Leadership for the Looking Glass program, and one of the things they taught us was this SBI model for difficult conversations. And SBI, very simply put, stands for S is a specific situation, E is the behavior that you witnessed, and I is the impact. And so what I want to say is, we'll make this this one-page PDF available to everybody attending today. It'll be posted on the APWA website later with the recording. But what this is, it's a one-page document where, when you're going to have a difficult conversation with an employee, colleague, coworker, whoever, be prepared. Write it down. What was the specific situation that you witnessed what they did? Write it down. Okay, hey, we're in a meeting at 10 a.m. on Monday, and you said this. Okay, so that's the behavior. Situation was Monday, 10 a.m. meeting, you and I and whoever else. Behavior was you said X, Y, Z, or email this, and the impact it had on me, which was, man, when you said it that way, the tone that you used, or the words that you used, or the body language, man, that all impacted me. It made me feel very demeaned. Like what I was bringing to the table didn't feel quality. And just by the way that you presented that, that was the impact it had on me. And so I want to be able to present these things in a way that allows for specific feedback. So then the employee or the colleague or, person you're dealing with can take and say, oh, okay, you know what? I didn't realize. I remember the situation. Thanks for being specific about the behavior that you saw. And I apologize for the impact that it had on you. And then on the bottom half of the sheet, you have your summary of how that conversation went with your employees. So again, this is just a tool that I like to use in preparation because again, you can't just walk down the hall and say, hey, let's jump into the conference room real quick. I just want to catch up with you. In the virtual environment, almost every meeting I have has to be calendared on my Outlook calendar with a Zoom link or whatever else. So, you can't, it's more, you have to be prepared, I guess is kind of the summary of this thing. It's just be prepared. If a lot of you guys probably are used something like this, but it's become very important to me to be at the ready to make sure we can have these conversations.
Well, and I think too, the sort of conversations you're talking about, John, where this sort of model is important to think through before you have the conversation, is you probably need to have that with your camera on. So if that means you need to put on a shirt and shave or comb your hair, or whatever, go out in the yard the weekend before and have your wife cut your hair, whatever the heck it is, be willing to have your camera on during that, because it's back to the communication slide 2 slides ago. It's going to be more difficult to have a trusting, authentic interaction for something that's a little more crucial if you have your cameras off, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it, Dave.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty self-limiting. I'll say that I've had a couple pretty I don't know, if I want to say contentious, but meetings where they got a little dramatic. There was some action, right? And one in particular, I remember, I had this project that was under construction, and it was using our fee and lieu program that we have. And the short version of that is a developer, instead of building the in-stream improvements, will give us the funds, and then we will manage the design and construction and execute on it. But in reality, what that means is I'm managing the developer's dollars, and some of those dollars are contingency dollars that he might get back if we don't use them. So we got into this sticky wicket with sort of an earthwork snafu on the construction of the project. And it was basically me, the contractor, and the developer talking this through to figure out what was fair. And it was pretty clear that the developer really didn't care at all about paying our contractor fairly. I mean, that's really what my book is written about. But here's the thing. There's like 5 of us on the call. 4 of us had our cameras on. The developer was the only one who didn't. He didn't have his camera on the whole time. And it just made it so much more awkward. And then 2 or 3 times during the conversation, we had 10 to 15 second awkward silences as people were playing chicken of who was going to talk first. And I'm sure he just got to sit there with his camera off, looking at us all looking awkward, like sort of making looks like this, like, like I don't know what to do. And I really wish he would have had his camera on. I mean, that just made it a much more difficult conversation, needlessly so, I would say. Yeah, it made it worse.
And again, it's back to those nonverbal. They communicate so much. And so basically you were trying to communicate with somebody and you had less than 50% of the communication channels open, right?
Yeah.
It made it extremely difficult. And so, yeah, that's one of the things too, just again, as we kind of close out this tip, which is, make sure that you do have your cameras on, that everybody's on the equal playing field, the tone, the quality, all those pieces, because again, that communication, particularly in challenging situations, you got to be able to have that ability to communicate on all levels, all 3 platforms: words, tone, and body language.
Yeah, and I would say another sort of thing I find actually useful in this environment, because not everything's bad about virtual communication. It's just a very non-neutral thing. Some things are worse, some things are better than in person. But one thing that I find that is kind of handy is how you can have so many reference materials at the ready if you're going to have one of these crucial conversations. And this is kind of a dramatization. Typically, I'd have multiple screens that would have all that stuff on it. But if you're going into something and you need to have some things at your fingertips to pull up that may come up in your conversation, this is really useful. Or even better yet, I had another meeting with a different developer type and for some reason with developers, things just tend to get contentious more easily, I find, and I'm sure you all can relate to that. But I had a younger engineer on the call with me, and what was great was as we were talking about some things and we needed to double check a reference or something or research something of was the developer what they were saying really true. My younger engineer guy who was really quick with the keyboard, he looked it up while I was still like sort of the one talking. And then all of a sudden in the meeting, he takes over the screen and shows the reference document that is like, hey, no, that's not what it says. Here it is. And I was like, Drew, you are the man. Like, yeah. So
Exactly.
that's one where if you're going to have a crucial conversation, you could actually have a backup there that can help you with some of that stuff. I think that's a really great use.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And yeah, the accessibility to all of our servers and our files, it's like they're all there. And it's easy to kind of pull them up on a different screen and just be prepared instead of, hey, give me a minute, I got to run back to my office and grab that notebook, right?
Yeah.
It's all right there. So yeah, just have it at the ready, be prepared for those things.
Yeah. So a couple of quick just technology tips and tricks. I'm sure many of you have figured this out by now, a lot of these things, but I'll just show you a couple things. Like with Zoom, this is on Zoom right now, and I have some embedded videos that have sound. And if you're going to do anything that has video, and Teams has something similar, but as you're going to share your screen, there will be toggles like on the bottom there that I have circled there where I specifically want to share my sound, and then it's got the other toggle that is to optimize my screen for video. And if you don't do that, it might mean you get to that part and it doesn't work. And then with Teams, it's got a similar thing. So when you go to share your screen, click the toggle that says include system audio, and then your video will work.
Yeah, just make a big difference again is you're just, kind of seamlessly, set these platforms up to make sure that it is producing at the best quality. And hey, and Dave, and just those kind of listening in, we are getting some of the chat features. Please continue to do that. We will answer those right after the conclusion of that. We'll walk through a lot of those questions. Mike Martin will moderate it for us. And again, if Mike doesn't like your question, he'll just throw it out. So it's nothing personal.
Or if he doesn't like us, he's going to give us the hard one.
I might have some internet challenges if that happens, Dave. Just yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Another one would be the chat function. I find this to actually be really useful as long as you use it. Don't do the failure version that we were talking about earlier. But I find that especially when you got larger groups, it's a good way to get people who otherwise might not verbally contribute during especially a bigger meeting. And particularly maybe some more of the introverted types. The chat function is a great way to solicit their opinions and have them chime in ways they're maybe sometimes more comfortable with, especially in a bigger setting. So that's where I think that can be great. But like we said earlier, be careful what you put in there.
No, but it's good, Dave, because again, this is, you kind of categorize people introvert versus extrovert. So this is a scenario where, I've been in meetings where there are people I know are trend towards being introverted. And so using the chat feature is really helpful because you can get the voice heard, you understand. And then what's really fun too, is I've seen a few people do this where they'll actually put a hyperlink into a document. Say if it's an internal meeting, they can throw a hyperlink into a folder where everybody can click on it. Hey, remember that document I was talking about? You can find it here. And then again, it's back in the chat history. You can always go back to it. Microsoft Teams, again, you can put it up into those folders and it's always readily available at your fingertips. So again, it's a tool that I think we'll continue to want to understand how to use and utilize well.
Yeah. Another thing I forgot to mention with technology tips and tricks really quick was, at least in Teams, and I'm not sure if you can do this in other platforms, but if you have somebody who's got a bunch of background noise and they're not muting themselves, at least in Teams, typically you can actually mute somebody else. The kicker is I don't think you can unmute them. So they might start talking and not realize they're muted. So there might be some etiquette with maybe telling them you're going to, because it might be a little, I don't know, you might rub somebody the wrong way if they know you got muted by them or something. But,
no, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Dave. Yeah, because that's exactly right. I've had that happen in a few of my meetings where I got a gentleman who has a hearing aid, and it's kind of connected through the phone, and it's really difficult, but it gets sadly just some really bad static where it's interferes with everybody else. So that's exactly it. It's like, hey, time out. Hey, John, just so you know, I'm going to go ahead and mute you because I'm getting some pretty bad static right now. Or if somebody else is presenting and it's a larger group, sometimes that's also the chat feature is like, hey, Joe, just so you know, I had to mute you. So make sure you unmute when you decide to speak up. And so again, that's another effective utilization of the chat feature.
Yeah, for sure. There's an etiquette though, be careful. Another thing, and this, I have to credit my coworker, Brooke Seymour, who brought this up recently, and I have become a believer in this, is just because we can meet virtually doesn't mean you have to stack them back to back to back to back every hour on the hour. And I know everybody on this call can relate to that experience. And so for internal meetings or it's just internal staff, I've gotten into the habit, and this was based on Brooke's idea, is I'll schedule a meeting at 1:05 and end at like 1:55 because I'm just like, there's no reason it has to be exactly an hour. It does not have to be that. So it might be, some people might be unnerved by that are external if they're not used to it. But there's no reason we have to just kill ourselves like that. Because if you sit through Zoom all day, it feels like torture. So it should be optional. Make it optional.
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more, Dave. That's probably how I spend 90% of my days is back-to-backs. And that is the other thing about virtual meetings. It's 12:01. Let's go. Like, where is everybody? Right? Whereas, back in the office, it was like, 5-minute rule, 7 minutes, maybe 15. If you're an executive, come roll it into the meeting. But now it's like, gosh, we're 2 minutes in, you feel like you're late.
Right.
So yeah, I agree. Let's create yourself some gap on either side.
Yeah. The first one I scheduled like that, I did have somebody say, did you mean to schedule that at 12:05? I was like, yes, I did.
That was intentional. Yes. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps up that section. And now we're going to dive into some of the tips and techniques on giving effective virtual presentations. And Dave, as we were preparing for this, I was remembering it was a year ago, January. So January 2019. Remember when you and I were asked to do a presentation for the City Parks Alliance, and it was going to be all virtual. Thank God the technology then didn't have our faces on it, so that's why they asked us. But we did. I remember sitting in my office. We had a little conference room, and it was like a little one of those conference phones, and we had our laptops and connected, and it was I want to tell you, that was probably one of those fearful moments in my life where I'm like, how's this going to work, and PowerPoint and all those things. But it was really interesting how we kind of were able to put that together and had that presentation. So it feels like this is old hat now, just putting these things together. But we've learned a lot of things, right?
Yeah, I just remember how anxious we were, and I remember we both couldn't sit, so we got like some boxes or something, and we set the laptop up on a box so we could look at it, but like stand and like walk around with the clicker. And then they had us on speakerphone, and then I think like somebody like tried to come in because there was another meeting after ours, and we're like, we're on the air, get out.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't have my little on-air studio, thing going on. It was kind of just really lowbrow, but that's exactly it. So, one of the things, and I'll kind of just dialogue a little bit here, Dave, on a couple items. One of the benefits I've seen from having these virtual presentations and being able to have the ability to have the internet and things, I've literally had given tours of projects using Google Earth, right? Just jump into Street View on Google Maps and things like that. And so there's just ways of doing that from that perspective. So, here's back to your point, David, of just standing, when you virtually think about what does it look like when you're making a presentation virtually? Like, this is what it feels like. You're literally in this massive conference room all by yourself. And you're not making eye contact. People are, they're not engaging, they're not making fun of you. You don't have little time cards like, dude, you're over time. Like tonight, today we're actually 11:55 already. We're going till 4 p.m. So I hope you're cool. But that was when I'm kidding. But it is, it's what does that audience look like? So think about putting yourself in that position when you're making presentations. Don't, sit on your couch as you're making a formal presentation, right?
Yeah. So we're going to get into a few tips and tricks with looking good and sounding good. So a few things with looking good. So with the PowerPoint, this would be an example of how I set up my PowerPoint, and really more or less how I have it running right now as I'm doing this presentation. Is my upper right screen is the one where I'm playing the slideshow, and that's the screen I'm sharing. And then my upper screen on the left, that's I actually have the presenter view on that one right now. And that's just to tell me what slide's coming next, which I find handy. And on this one, I actually have the presenter view on the laptop, I guess. But what I have right now in front of me is I have my notes that I'm kind of scrolling. So it's kind of nice in a virtual environment. I can have my full notes right in front of me, and I put it on my laptop so it's on the screen where I have my camera. So it's not, so it doesn't look like I'm looking away from everybody all the time. I'm looking at the screen where my notes are. So a couple things about how to set that up. If just a couple of technology tricks. If you're in PowerPoint, there's this button for setup slideshow, and then you can go and you just hit that toggle called use presenter view. And then that's what will allow you to have that presenter view. And then when if you're not sure of where you have your presenter notes on which screen, you can go up to the toggle as you're playing your slideshow and hit display settings, and you can swap presenter view and put it on a different screen. And you can even minimize it and drag it off to the screen you want to. So I find that really helpful. Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, and again, it's also, we'll pivot into this kind of panel presentation, but again, the setup. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, I have one other thing I wanted to mention. I've presented a couple times, and this is just with the technology with PowerPoint. So I've presented to my board once recently and to a city council once during this pandemic. And in both cases, I did not get to control the slideshow. And so typically when I do PowerPoint, I have a ton of slides because I animate a ton of things and I use a lot of graphics that animate, and I'm clicking a lot of times. I'm advancing slides a lot. That doesn't work when I'm with a board or a city council because somebody else is advancing the slides. So when I present to a board or council, I need to minimize the animations, minimize the number of slides more so than I ever normally would, because I usually have to tell somebody to advance the slide, and it's annoying to have to do that every 5 seconds.
Yeah, so. Dave, could you advance the slide, please?
Ah!
Hey, there we are. All right, next topic. Sorry, Dave.
That's great. I love that. That's good.
That wasn't even scripted. That's all real stuff. Also, back to the point, I guess, on just when you're giving a presentation, there are certain times, like in this one, where this past October, I was on a panel for the Smart Cities Connect. And so I was actually, talking about our downtown Westminster and some of the, district energies things, LED lights, water, LEED, silver, all those different elements that were, delivering on that project. And so I was sitting on this panel when I had somebody from Virginia, there was somebody from Florida, there was somebody from Texas, moderators out of Pueblo here in Colorado. And so you see on this particular screenshot that I took, I was like, hey, I'm sitting on a panel. So I visualized myself kind of being side by side people. And then what, the reality though is all you see is kind of from, about the midpoint up. Here was a live photo, right? So I actually, here's what it looks like. I'm wearing shorts, it was a hot day in Colorado. I was like, got the lights going on. And it's really just kind of funny when you think about the reality of sitting on a panel. It's like, dude, I'd never sit on a panel with some shorts on, right? And yes, I do have shorts on. That wasn't a skirt. Just to be clear.
I don't want to visualize anything going on under that table, John. You can stop right there.
But this isn't new, right? I mean, I think we've all seen a few photos like this next one, Dave, of other people that have done exactly that same thing in different platforms.
Yeah, this is one where I saw this on social media where this gal was like a professor talking about some serious world issue on the news. And then she actually tweeted out the following comparison. This was actually what she looked like when she was what was going on around her. And it's kind of like the whole working mom thing, we're just kind of making it work. And that's what she looked like on screen. So I think, the point is, all you got to do is make what's on the field of view of the camera look good, and everything else is whatever, fair game to have total chaos around you. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly it. It's such a low bar. Like, seriously, kids, like, we can figure out how to make at least this part of you look not awesome, not even like very good, just okay, just not distracting. Top Gun backgrounds and things. So
yeah. And speaking of presentable, here's a little, just really short clip of John at a talk recently, which I will play.
Welcome. The webcast is about to begin. Please note that this call is being recorded. Please stand by as we wait for attendees to drop in. So, John, you said you don't drink coffee?
Yeah, there was an inside joke there, by the way. So
it's just I got a kick out of your laugh, so that's why I left that in
No, that's good. So yeah, this was a presentation, this guy with the Timmons group on the East Coast. And so I'd done about an hour-long presentation. What you notice in this one is I'm standing up. Again, that's that whole presentation. I've got the lights going a little bit differently because when you do these, typically, on a little platform or stage, and so you want to be able to project. Your voice is different when you're standing versus sitting. And so being able to do that, I will say though, as a downside though, on some of these, because your camera is still, you got to be very careful. You don't, keep moving too much while you're standing and making presentations, because that too can get a little bit of annoying. So you do have to stay pretty, within that kind of 6-inch square on either side of yourself.
Yeah, notice John shows up, and I'm sorry, the end frame there. I didn't realize how goofy that made you look. I apologize, John.
No.
But the notice the lighting on John. So the lighting can make a difference too. And I'll show you what not to do, which is an example of me from when I spoke at a city council meeting for Commerce City about a month ago. I hadn't really had anything in the evening too much during this pandemic, so I didn't really appreciate how crappy the lighting is in this room I'm in right now at night. I do have the light on behind me, but it kind of looks like I'm staring into a television, which I guess I pretty much was. Yeah. So that would be what not to do. And John, maybe you want to share what this next one is.
Yeah, so no, that's exactly it. Lighting matters, right? Especially as the days are getting shorter. So there are some simple things you can invest in. Like today, I got a little 12-inch ring light that's, I think the standoff to the left has different, color qualities. You can actually change it. I noticed I don't look as good in this kind of blue thing. I don't know why, but you can actually have different colors and kind of switch it, dim it. So it's pretty nice. So that's kind of the real, setup that I have going on. And again, it just makes a difference, particularly if you're the one who is presenting. Again, so much of that communication comes through the nonverbals, the eye movements, the smiles, all those kind of things. And so you want to be able to have a setup that actually works with the environment that you're in, particularly as things get a little bit darker during the day.
Yeah, and I know we're right at like 12:03, and we don't have too much more material, which we'll try to wrap it up here pretty shortly. And John and I can stay on as long as anybody else who feels like asking questions. Just wanted to mention that. Another little thing I discovered the other day is if you're on Zoom, if you go to the settings and video, you can actually do this touch up my appearance thing, which I don't know, it's kind of novel. But here would be me without the touch ups. You always have to have the side by side comparison, and then with the touch ups, there it is. So just a little thing too about appearance.
That's an amazing change, Dave. Wow.
Isn't it? It's just unhappy, and now I'm happy. It's just I needed that. That's all I needed.
Love it.
That's it. I got another tip I'd suggest trying sometime is typically if you go to like your programs and you can find your camera and turn it on manually, and you can actually record a little short video clip of yourself. You can actually just see what you look like and sound like a little bit, because the next thing is about sounding good, because it's hard to know exactly how well your sound comes through if you don't actually record it sometime. So I encourage people to record like a 30-second or 1-minute clip, because I think, especially for people that don't wear a mic like I am, or like Mike Martin's wearing one right now. And John, you've got the nicer camera, which has a built-in speaker that picks up the sound really well, or the built-in mic. It's difficult when you can't hear people, especially if it gets really echoey. So you have to channel your inner DJ a little bit. And actually in the radio industry, when people are working remotely and they don't have a studio available, they'll actually go so far as to build themselves pillow forts. And they do this to get rid of the echo. So you really just try to soften the surfaces, the physical surfaces all around you where your microphone is. I don't typically do that. I don't have that set up in here right now, but if I was gonna pre-record a more produced video, I actually will do this. And this last one's my favorite, where the person maybe they're like looks like they're in the lobby of a hotel, and they just kind of stuck the coat over their head. The other thing with sound I would offer is that I noticed with Mike's wearing one of these, and I've noticed some of my coworkers have these. I actually ordered one of these myself because I've noticed people that wear the headsets come in clearer than anybody else that I ever meet with. And so I actually am going to get interviewed on Zoom for somebody's podcast in a couple weeks. And it was important to me that I sound really good for that, because that's all it's going to be. And so this is the model that I found from somebody who I had heard on meetings, and I was like, boy, they sound really good. And this is the model that I found that they're using. And it's on sale right now, 40% off. There you go. I do not get any royalties from sharing that information with you.
That's funny.
Right. Okay. Group presentations. A little bit about that. I think I'm just going to leave this up on the screen, John. And we
Yeah,
probably got to be pretty quick about this.
Yeah, well, I think you and I and probably everybody else on this call have sat through a number of these where we're interviewing for consultants or contractors or whatever it may be. And I would just tell you that there are a few things, at least that I've noticed, and then Dave, please pile on. But particularly in the virtual setting is, how many people can you effectively fit into your conference room, right? In a virtual setting, you can invite your entire staff to be part of the interview, but is it valuable? Well, the answer is obviously no. So make sure you have the right people in that room. And importantly, have a script. I know when we have our city council meetings, we'll actually have our planners follow a very specific script so they know the time. It's like, maybe got 15 minutes to make this entire presentation. Make sure you write it out. Make sure you're acknowledging, particularly if you're interviewing, if you're in the private sector or whatever it is, pass the baton to the next person over, say, okay, so that concludes my part. Hey, Joe, why don't you pick it up from here? And so you're actually passing, because I've sat through somewhere, I've had, people in the meeting say, yeah, I'm not really sure why I'm in this interview today. Just I happen to be an SVP with Corp, and I don't know, I'm here to support those guys. You're like, okay, let's make sure you kind of prepare ahead of time. So again, just a couple of things that I've noticed on when you have a group making a presentation, just, be prepared, have the right people in it, script it out, and know who's talking on what points to be able to pass it effectively through that meeting. How about you?
And a couple other things I've noticed was if there was a group of like 4, 5, 6 or whatever, I tended to appreciate when it seemed like it was very clear that it was congruent and they were all kind of had thought through how it was going to look and sound. And so some examples would be they'd all use the same virtual background, right? And so it made them very clearly part of the same team. I liked that. One that and it was pretty clear, like they knew who was saying what and when. One thing I saw somebody do that was really novel, but then in retrospect, I can say I wouldn't recommend it, was they had like 6 or 7 speakers and 6 of them all did it like I'm doing now, sharing screens and using their laptop camera. But one of them, for some reason, decided to use the camera, but then like have the camera pointed at an actual projector screen in a conference room. And they got up and stood at the projector screen and pointed and talked from the projector screen. And at first I was like, oh, it's like old school. We're like really in a conference room. And then I quickly realized that they had dimmed the lights so that the screen would show up and I couldn't see the speaker very well. And then because it was a video of a screen showing a picture, I couldn't, and he had really busy slides. I couldn't actually see what he had on the slides. He had a bunch of words and tables. I couldn't really read them. So I would discourage that unless maybe it's you by yourself, or just have the same sort of setup for each of you. I think I would say is good.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dave. So true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now, Dave, I think you're going to wow us all with some of your technology, kicking it up to the next level. So everything we've been talking about is kind of John Burke JV level. Now, Scooter's going to show us how to bring it home, man. So yeah, launch it. Here we go.
I'll be really quick with this, and we're going to be done in 1 minute. Okay, one minute or so. Okay, so here's I was doing a pre-recorded presentation for our board, and it was like a yearly sort of summary of big projects that we'd completed the year prior. And so I decided to, because I have sort of a filmmaking kind of hobby, I decided to amp up the production quality. And so if you have a chance to pre-record something, if you don't want to learn this stuff yourself, maybe find somebody who's good at it and you can maybe kick it up a notch. So here's an example of what I did.
Good afternoon to Mile High Flood District board members and staff, and to any visitors who may be watching this video. Every year or two, we take the board on a tour of recently completed projects. It's a great opportunity to show you some of the awesome projects we get to build. But it turns out that sticking 50 of us on a bus on a 100-degree day isn't too COVID friendly. So this year, we're going virtual.
Yeah, so Kick that up a notch, and I'll show you what I did to make that happen. I actually had a green screen set up in my basement with lights, and then the pillow for it for the sound. I had in front of me was the laptop in front, and I put it right below the camera, so I'm looking up at the camera a lot. But that was my script, and then my laptop to the left is actually playing the PowerPoint, and I was recording the screen of my PowerPoint so the timing would work. And then in front of me on the bottom of the photo is a nice sound recorder. So that's why the sound sounded really good. I had a decent sound recorder. Anybody wants to learn more about this, this is the software I use. It's called CyberLink Power Director. It's like 10, 15 bucks a month. You get a subscription. If you want to see some other popular options, Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere are pretty popular. How I made that work is in the video editing software, you can kind of layer different things. This is a screenshot from the editing software. You got the background image, you got my video, you got the sound, you've got the overlay banner, and then the picture in picture, and those just kind of layer over the top of each other. And then chroma key is this thing that makes the green screen work. So basically in the video editing software, I can just hit something called chroma key, pick a color on the screen that the video software will remove from the video. And so that's what makes that. It's really that simple. It's not actually that hard. The one thing was I had to use a high resolution camera to make the green screen effect work. I tried it with my laptop camera and the resolution wasn't good enough. So
we did have a question on what kind of camera was it, if you don't mind sharing.
that was a Sony DSLR. It was an A7 III. So it's a pretty nice camera setup for that. But I think any DSLR that'll shoot video could probably get the quality you need. It's just like a cheaper one, you might actually hear the lens continually trying to focus on you. That's where the more expensive camera silently focuses, if that makes sense. Because as you kind of move around, it's going to be trying to focus a lot, and the motors make noise.
Gotcha. Well, that's awesome, Dave. Well, I had never seen any of that. So yeah, you made it look so easy, and I think that camera actually made you look better too. Just saying.
Thanks, I think. Yeah.
Okay, man. Well, again, I think we are now wrapping it up, but in conclusion, we just want to share what we saw as maybe some of those top 10 virtual meeting failures to avoid, get into some of the productive virtual meetings, that what it really means to have, good meetings, virtually as well. Effective virtual presentations, some tips and tricks on lighting, sound, standing, sitting, all those kind of things. And, here's our kind of final point is virtual communication isn't going away. I think, Dave, as you and I were talking, even when we get back into the office, there are times when we'll just say, hey, why don't we just jump on a quick video call instead of driving halfway across, the state to have a meeting, or particularly if, I meet with developers out of state and it's like, man, we're gonna be doing this for a long time. It's not gonna go away. Hopefully the virus stuff gets behind us here the next, 12, 18 months, whatever, but this virtual environment is gonna be here, man.
Yeah, I think whether it's getting groceries or takeout or conducting business, I think this is, in a good way, forced us all to sort of rethink what it makes sense to get in the car and drive for and what maybe not. And I would say meetings would be up there depending on the meeting. So yeah, with that, I'm sorry we went over a little bit, but John and I can stick around for any questions for people who have them.
Yep, no, appreciate it. And so, Dave, just so you know, I was going to pre-record like this amazing standing ovation, woo! But I didn't have.
Stop.
Virtual flood roses at your feet. No, hey, well done. But no, we will turn over Mike Martin. I don't know if you want to maybe help us run through some of those questions. We'd be happy to do that now, man.
Yeah, thanks, John, and kudos, guys. Thanks, Dave and John. Great job. Great presentation. A lot of stuff to take away. So, yeah, a couple things I'll throw out, a couple comments, and then a couple questions through the chat line. Two kind of general ones. One from Melissa. Melissa, if I apologize if I pronounced your last name right, Melissa Yucca, on that C920X camera you put on there. She gave thumbs up to that. So that's a good camera. Has put it to use, and good note there. And then Greg Muhonen posted that be careful using blurred backgrounds. It can trigger vertigo. I had not heard that before, but just a side comment that seemed related. On the question side, so I'm trying to see who asked this question, but Teresa Patterson asked, Any suggestions for how to encourage people or ask them to turn their camera on if you're in an unusual or difficult meeting, Dave, like the one you were? Do you guys have any thoughts on that, or have you heard any good ways to encourage people to turn their cameras on?
I would say that that's really tough to do gently in the meeting. I think the main suggestion I'd have is, if you think that's going to be really important, is to maybe tell people ahead of time, because then now they've sort of intentionally disregarded your request, and now that puts them as kind of the one sort of, I don't know, disrupting you instead of the other way around, perhaps. I don't know, John, if you have anything.
No, I think that's it. I mean, I think a lot of it is in the setup. Very first, again, I think we find ourselves in this mode at the beginning of meetings virtually. You have to set the ground rules. You know, hey, keep your mics muted unless you're speaking, because we can get some background noise. We might have, and I've literally had to do this. I said, hey, you know, if you are, we're getting a lot of static, just, you know, pre-warning, I will mute you in that. I can also, and I've said this in, you know, mostly a joking way, but I said, I can also kick you out of the meeting. You know, so if all of a sudden you're not in the meeting, that was intentional. I probably did it on purpose for a certain reason. So I think I only had to do that once. But as far as, yeah, just being direct, say, hey, and I think, Teresa, this comes into those soft skills, right? Which is, you know, hey, Ted, you know, this is kind of a difficult conversation right now. You know, I'd really appreciate it if you could turn on your camera. Is there any reason why you can't? Yeah, and you know, kind of frame it in a no response question. You know, I think in negotiations, you'll hear a lot of times, and I don't have time to dive deep into this, but you get into the yes mode. Everybody wants to say yes. Like, okay, you feel like a used car salesman if the other person's saying yes all the time. You actually want to pivot and give them a no question. Hey, Ted, is there any reason why you can't turn your camera on? No, of course not. Oh, damn. All right, I guess I'm putting it on. Right. And so it's tough, it's sensitive, but when you frame it in a way that they understand why, it's like, man, you know, for me, Ted, it's important that I see your expressions as we're having this conversation, because it's challenging. I think just being transparent and candid about what you're feeling about it at that point in time. So that's what I would share.
Great answer, John. Way to use Splitting the Difference. That's a good way to get into that kind of stuff, right?
That's great.
That's a good book. If anybody cares, that's the reference there to a book to use that skill there, answering questions the right way. So similar question to you guys. Do you guys feel there's any proper etiquette? And this is from Tom White, related to when is it right to have everybody have their camera on versus everybody off? When you get into bigger meetings, you have 10, 12 staff meetings. Is there any kind of break point in your guys' mind related to etiquette on that end?
Yeah, I'll just say that's tough. I mean, particularly, you can only fit so many people on your screen. So as a standard, I don't ever limit the number of people that I think can have their cameras on, but I'm going to probably start to limit the number of people in the meeting, unless it's just a webinar. Like, you know, at the city, we'll have, you know, kind of monthly meetings where it's literally our CEO just talking to 400 or 500 staffers. Well, that's just a webinar and it's okay. Everybody's camera's off. If you're in a more intimate setting where you got to have people engaged, it's kind of the rule of thumb too, is after a certain number of people in a meeting, you have diminishing return on the value of that meeting. You know, if it can be handled in an email or different breakouts or different ways of doing that. So I don't know that there's a specific number. I would just say I'm probably limiting the number of people in the meeting. Otherwise, it's just going to be me talking a lot and really not interacting, because you just physically can't with 15, 20 people. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the interaction aspect and context of whatever the meeting is matters a lot. Of course, the number of people plays into that too. But I was a part of a training last week with the district we had our sort of internal leadership academy. There was 19 of us in that training, and then there was 20 of us on the call if you include the instructor. And she primed us ahead of time to all keep our cameras on, because she wanted it to be a really sort of relationship building experience. She really wanted to make sure we heard from everybody at least a little bit. And I think, you know, if it's going to be a really interactive sort of thing, I think should be really fair game. If you're going to have a really one-way sort of transmission of information and people are just listening, that might be a little bit unnecessary to ask that of people. Then it kind of feels like you're trying to police them to make sure they're actually paying attention. You know, so I think the context of the meeting matters, and what's the level of interaction you're hoping to get.
Super, great. One just came in from Steve Schultz about, this is more of a comment, I'd say that any etiquette here around attendees adding who they work for after their name. Is that something you guys have seen? I have not seen that. Any history there?
Yeah, no, go ahead, Dave, you get something?
I haven't seen that much. I could see that being helpful if it's a bunch of new faces and new people. I definitely had some meetings where there's somebody on and maybe this is where this is coming from, and I'm like, who are you? You know? Yeah. And so to where I could see that being helpful.
Yeah, where I've seen that is, these are environments where you don't know the other attendees, so this could be, again, a national conference, maybe you're in a breakout room, because I've done those as well, I kind of see those. This is where the chat feature actually is really helpful. So as the moderator, you could say, hey, we got, 50 people on the call today. Why don't you just put your name and who you work for in the chat box? And I found that to be really helpful, just because then you do know kind of who they are. And I've seen people even put their company's web address in there, say, hey, I work for, XYZ Corp, here's our web address in there. You can click that and find out more, particularly in those environments. So that's a place where I would recommend, if you do have that situation, just, that is a good use of the chat feature.
Yeah, and I like the idea of using your name label for different purposes. When I was in that training last week, we had the Myers-Briggs personality test, so some people were putting their 4 letters after their name sort of thing, and it was kind of helpful in that way. I will say I had a fail recently, because when I was initially using Zoom during the pandemic, it was mostly we were playing games, virtual games with family, and I hadn't used Zoom in a while, and then I had my daughter's parent-teacher conference, and it was really funny that the name I had used, like a funny name for the game we were playing, was Big Daddy. So for my daughter's parent-teacher conference, where it says Dave Skudis now under my face, it said Big Daddy, which was actually kind of really funny because I was talking to her teacher. It's like, oh, Big Daddy, okay, I guess you're trying to say something.
That's funny.
Nice. That's a fail. Also, be careful what picture you have up there. My kids have done that. When you turn your camera off and some picture pops up, it's like, what is that?
Yeah, because whatever you had as your last background in Zoom in particular, it will keep it for the next
Keeps it.
time
That's
you
right.
get on Zoom.
Yeah.
And I had a coworker who their kid was on using their Zoom and had chosen a funny picture of like a dog pooping as the background. So they got on a
Yes.
meeting that was going to be like a crucial meeting, and behind them was a picture of a dog pooping. Like,
Yeah. That's awesome.
All right, so I think we're out of time. We're up at 25 minutes past the hour. So thanks, Dave. Thanks, John. Appreciate the humor on a Friday. Great job with this. I'm sure there's many more that people have seen and heard. So thank you for putting these out there. Again, we'll post this to the website, so it'll be out there. I think we said you guys have a slide. John, you had one that you could post a document that we can put on there as well, so people are interested for that. Wanted to thank Pam Weimer for helping set this all up and run in the background. Really appreciate that, kind of, for putting this together. And to all the participants, thanks for coming here. We had upwards of almost 60 people here today, so that's great. So thanks for joining in. Just a reminder, upcoming sessions, so you guys know. So the next couple conferences that APWA puts on, the Construction Inspection Conference typically happens right after the new year. We're going to do that virtually this year, and it'll be similar to this. We'll do some free webinars similar to this on Zoom, so we're scheduling those. And the same is likely going to be doing for the April Spring Street Conference. We'll be doing some Zoom meetings and conferences for that as well. There'll be emails sent out about that and more information coming in the coming weeks and months on that, so be looking forward to that. So John and Dave, thank you very much. Appreciate your time here and your presentation. Really great stuff. To everybody, have a good Friday, have a good weekend, and if I don't see you, have a good Thanksgiving. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Yep.
Thanks.
See you.